The Veilfar station hummed with 1,000 languages at once, merchant dialects from 6-star systems, the low-frequency rumble of cargo loaders, the sizzling smell of 12 different cuisines burning on open grills. It was the kind of place where anything could be bought, anything could be arranged, and almost anything could be forgiven, provided the credits cleared. Lyra Vera sat alone at a corner table, nursing something the bartender had called nebula wine and which tasted, she decided, exactly like antifreeze mixed with grape cough syrup. She drank it anyway. 3 weeks on a slow freighter from the Kepler transit hub had lowered her standards considerably. She was unremarkable to look at, by galactic standards. No bioluminescent skin. No secondary joints. No prehensile tail or cranial crest. Just a baseline humanoid, medium height, dark hair pulled into a loose knot at the back of her neck, wearing a worn cargo jacket with too many pockets. The galaxy was full of humanoids. Most of them came from soft worlds. Garden worlds. Worlds where the apex predators topped out at around 80 kilograms and the local bacteria had the decency to stay out of the bloodstream. Lyra came from Earth. That distinction, she had found, rarely meant anything until it suddenly meant everything. She noticed Zyrex Thorn the moment he walked in, because she noticed everyone who walked in. Old habit. On Earth, situational awareness wasn't a skill, it was survival. You learned it the same way you learned not to pet strange dogs or swim in unfamiliar rivers, through the consequences of not learning it. Zyrex was hard to miss regardless. He stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, broad-shouldered in the way that suggested actual bone density rather than gym performance. His species, Calven, if she was reading the cranial ridges correctly, were known throughout the station as muscle for hire. Not the thinking kind. The kind you rented when you needed something broken without negotiation. He was looking at her with the particular expression of someone who had already decided what was going to happen and was simply waiting for the script to begin. Lyra took another sip of antifreeze wine. He crossed the bar in 12 strides. Sat down across from her without being invited. Placed both forearms on the table in a posture that was designed, she understood, to communicate dominance, territorial claim, and the implicit threat of violence in a single gesture. She looked at his forearms, then back up at his face. "Can I help you?" she asked. "You're the courier." His voice was a subsonic growl translated through a collar translator. "The one carrying the Meridian data core." "I'm a courier," she agreed. "I carry lots of things." "The data core." He leaned forward. "My employer wants it." "You're going to give it to me." Lyra set down her glass. "And if I don't?" He smiled. It was the smile of someone who had asked that question once and found it so amusing he decided never to experience it being answered. Then he reached under the table and pressed something cold and hard against her knee. A weapon. Something with a wide barrel, she noted, probably a dispersal type. Messy, short range, but in a crowded bar, that was almost the point. He wasn't going to fire it. He was just showing her the grammar of the conversation. Lyra looked down at her knee. She looked back up. She reached up and adjusted her hair, one loose strand that had escaped the knot and fallen across her cheek. She tucked it back with the unhurried precision of someone reorganizing a sock drawer. Then she looked at Zyrex Thorn across the table and asked, pleasantly, "Finished?" He blinked. It was a very small reaction. But Lyra had learned to read very small reactions. He had expected fear. Or at minimum the performance of calm, the white-knuckled, carefully maintained blankness of someone who was afraid but trying not to show it. What he had not expected was someone who genuinely, apparently, did not register a gun against their knee as a meaningful escalation of the situation. "You don't understand what I'm holding," he said. "Dispersal charge," she said. Calven manufacture, probably military surplus given the grip style. Effective range about 3 meters. Which means, she added, that you're also inside it. Another blink. "My homeworld," Lyra said, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms, has approximately 8.7 million species of identified fauna. Of those, somewhere between 4 and 6,000 are capable of killing an adult human. That number goes up significantly if you include the ones that can do it by accident. I'm not finished. Her voice was pleasant. Conversational. The tone of someone explaining bus routes. We also have weather events that generate sustained winds above 300 kilometers per hour. Geological activity that can liquefy solid ground. Electromagnetic storms that disable technology across continental ranges. An atmospheric oxygen concentration high enough that fires, when they start, are enthusiastic about continuing. She tilted her head. We have a bacterium, singular, one species, that has killed more humans than all wars combined. We spent 3 centuries trying to eradicate it. We have not succeeded. Zyrex Thorn had not moved the weapon. But he had also not moved. The gravity on my world, Lyra continued, is higher than galactic average. Which means human bone density is higher. Human muscle density is higher. Human cardiovascular capacity is higher. Our bodies are, from an engineering standpoint, designed for conditions that would hospitalize most of the species I've met out here in about 40 minutes. She picked up her glass again. We've been at war with our own planet since we developed consciousness. We won. Mostly. This doesn't change. It changes quite a lot, she said. Because here's the thing about growing up on a Deathworld, Zyrex. She said his name without hesitation, and something in that, the fact that she'd already known it, had already done her homework, made his grip shift slightly on the weapon. You develop a very specific relationship with danger. It stops being a signal to panic. It becomes information. She paused. Right now the information is, you're holding a weapon you don't intend to fire in a public location, which means you're hoping I don't know that. I do. You've been watching me for 11 minutes, which means you have backup. I've already identified 2 of them, booth by the east entrance, one near the bar. Your employer wants the data core intact, which means you need me functional and cooperative. Killing me is your absolute last option. The bar continued its 1,000-language hum around them. Lyra set her glass down. So here's my counteroffer, she said. You go back to your employer and explain that the courier didn't cooperate. I finish my drink, which I paid for and intend to experience fully regardless of quality. And we both pretend this conversation happened in a timeline that neither of us is professionally obligated to document. Zyrex Thorn looked at her for a long moment. She could see him recalculating. She'd seen it before, that specific recalibration that happened when someone from a comfortable world encountered the particular quality of attention that Earth tended to produce. It wasn't aggression, exactly. It wasn't bravado. It was something harder to name, the absolute, bone-deep lack of surprise at finding oneself in a dangerous situation, because every situation had always been potentially dangerous, and the only reasonable response was to think faster. You're not scared, he said. Not an accusation. More like something that had just been confirmed. I'm from Earth, she said simply. We exported the concept of fear to our predators. We kept the adrenaline. He removed the weapon from against her knee. Slowly. With the careful movements of someone who had reconsidered the entire structure of their afternoon. He stood. The employer will find another way, he said. The employer usually does, she agreed. Tell them I said so. He left without further comment. The 2 backup operatives, she'd actually spotted 3, not 2, but there was no reason to mention that, filtered out behind him in the practiced non-coordination of people pretending they didn't know each other. Lyra watched them go. Then she looked back at her drink. Antifreeze. Grape cough syrup. She finished it anyway. Later, replaying the security footage, The station's intelligence analyst would note the exact moment when a 2.4-meter Colven mercenary pressed a dispersal weapon against the knee of a human courier and the human in question had reached up, and fixed her hair. He would mark the timestamp. Forward it to 3 colleagues. Add a single line of annotation. Deathworlders. Every time.